So now we can have the free for all, not one at a time. So I know we did have a hand up. We had Tom. You had your hand up before, so you wanted to just go ahead and make your comment or question now.
Well, this was more towards Aaron, as far as with the demolitions. I'm a former lead abatement contractor, weatherization contractor, big weatherization contractor for the city. And our requirements were great, to keep lead contained. And with the demo of houses, they used to not even do abatement on asbestos. But now, there's nothing to do with lead. And I mean, when we did outsides, we had to do the whole dang house and everything. And that is just something that I feel is just insane for that. And I've got some buildings around me coming down that I know have asbestos in them, but they've been on the most dangerous building list since 2011, but they're not going to abate anything. So now you're relying on that, and I've got a school right across the street from them. So I'm going to try to be dealing with the demo company and the asbestos, because they've got to do air monitoring, like who does that, how does that, but I own 2 properties next to all this. And then likewise, I got tickets for peeling paint when I'm next to something they've been tearing down for years. And they did avoid that. They did get rid of the second set of tickets I got. I did have to pay for the first. But that's something that should be looked at. I mean, the danger of the floating, and then how much of it do they really get rid of when they backfill? What do they do? What are the testing requirements? Which I'm going to find out, because they're supposed to tear down the buildings within the next couple of weeks.
He said
Do you want to just hand me the
yeah, I can do
this part?
No? Or, no.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
No, he's upset. I think you bring up a lot of great points. About the blight tickets, I have found that the city is extremely capricious in their ticketing. There seems to be no rhyme or reason for who gets ticketed, when, or why. I don't think it's very targeted. It would make sense to focus your enforcement efforts on the worst actors in the city. I know a couple of landlords that decided to register their homes to get on the path to compliance, and they were immediately issued blight tickets, which seems like a really absurd deterrent to improving the housing stock on the city's part. And sources within BC have told me that there may not be a hard quota among inspectors for the number of tickets they're expected to issue, but there's a lot of pressure to issue tickets. So I think a lot of it's unnecessary, especially for just regular homeowners like yourself. As far as demolition goes, the city was facing a major investigation by the Office of the Inspector General at HUD for really poor controls over its demolition program, basically doing no due diligence to figure out where the backfill was coming from and what kind of stuff was in the backfill. The demolition program has now been folded in with the city. I guess they think that's going to make that better. I am not sure that's true. I think that the requirements to ensure the safety of backfill is very low. You don't have to test what's in it. Someone at the city in the demolition department will do a visual test. That's the standard requirement for backfill if they know that the source is a residential source, meaning they get the dirt from, I don't know where, honestly. In a lot of cases, I don't think the city does either. We found that the city was using backfill dirt from a cemetery, which, you know, um, it's yeah, it's, you know, just instinctually gross. But I think like there are a lot of chemicals used in the burial process, and it, you know, unsafe chemicals. But cemeteries are considered a residential source of backfill dirt. So I think your concerns are entirely valid, is my whole point.
Well, and one thing with the weatherization program, they would come in and test the inside of the house and the outside. And minute qualities would get you into crazy cleaning. I was very lucky, I had some really good employees, so I didn't get any of those. But some of my fellow contractors went through, and then they do this, which makes no sense whatsoever. A whole house compared to a little putting siding on it or something.
Yeah, that was one of the motivations to update the rental registry ordinance too, is because the lead requirement would also, you know, you had to test the soil on the outside. And you basically test any, you know, dirt sample in the entire city and there's going to be lead in it. So that made it extremely difficult to pass and abate. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One is with the LLC registration. Can you talk a little bit more about like why there isn't as much transparency? Like why is it helpful to have? I mean, is there some business reason or some explanation that's given for like why names don't have to be attached or why people can remain anonymous? And that's kind of part one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say it's just more about, because this is a nationwide issue. This is not a Michigan-specific issue. There's almost no municipalities in the entire country that require businesses to list members or people who invest more than a certain percentage in the company. So I think it's more just about the way we treat companies in the United States. And property law is sacrosanct here. It's basically entitles you to, you know, it's the city of Detroit has a nuisance abatement program that in theory allows them to take back property from people that have done a poor job taking care of it. It is extremely legally dubious. They're based on, you know, just real estate law in the United States. I'm not trying to put a judgment on whether or not I think it's a good thing, but yeah, there was a national law passed in 2021, I think, called the Corporate Transparency Act, that would have gone into effect at the beginning of the year and would have required every single company to list people who own more than, I think, 5% stake in any company in the United States. That would have been a huge deal. It's being challenged in court. An injunction was placed on the law going into effect. And I think attorneys I talk to are very doubtful that it will actually go into effect. Again, because corporations are just given a very wide berth to act as they please, and not, you know, that includes keeping even the people who own the company secret.
The other question just was, so I know we've talked about Detroit speculation. I'm guessing this is also in other major cities in the state. Also, is this an issue, or has that been investigated, that speculation in Grand Rapids or Flint or Muskegon or?
I have not looked into that, yeah.
I mean, you would just imagine that, especially in places like Flint. So one way of thinking about it, I don't know how much. All right. One way of thinking about it is, what's the characteristics in a city that puts it at real threat for a large-scale pest speculation, right? So a lot of that is the property value has to be low enough, and then there has to be some level of economic upside for these speculators. So Detroit now and in the last 10 years was a better place to speculate than it was, unless you had a really long time horizon that you were willing to do, than it was the 10 years before that, right? I mean, because it was on the downswing just as far as actual total property amount goes. as value. Now it's on the upswing, that's going to be a place to speculate. So, based on that, educated guess would be Flint has a significant issue with speculation. Grand Rapids would have comparatively less so, because it has comparatively higher property values. But, like, if you look at the more specific neighborhood level, there probably are places in each city in the state that have some version of that. But I do think, and Aaron probably knows more than this than I do as far as the reporting goes, is speculators tend to have a network effect. So, like, it's more likely that there are multiple speculators in a given spot than there are just one, because they actually work, whether that's directly in communication with each other or as like a general knowledge. So you tend to have speculators group rather than go out on their own.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Real quickly, you look at, say, the Stellantis plant that was redeveloped with significant city input in 2019, or at least the plans were announced in 2019. And in order to make that deal happen, the city had to give extremely generous deals to Michael Kelly, John Hance, the Maroons. There might have been even another speculator thrown in there. So you've got three of the biggest property speculators in the entire city that just all happen to own land previously worth very little, now worth an astounding amount, all of a sudden. How did they all get lucky? It's quite an amazing coincidence. So I think Sam's absolutely right. They do definitely tend to follow each other. They're tracking development. They have sources that are connected to other businesses in the city. They're aware of what is potentially going to be very valuable, and they all tend to cluster in those spots. And if you look at the property praxis map, or you look at the unlisted properties that the Detroit Land Bank owns, you'll notice a lot of them are near industrial parts of the city. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Okay.
I would say about Flint, I've done some research in the past. The difference in Flint is that everything is done at the county level, Genesee County. So there's not the disconnect we have in Detroit between the city's data and the county data. And that makes a really, really big difference. The county, it's not, I mean, you mentioned the treasurer's lack of cooperation. The Wayne County Register of Deeds is a whole nother, we could do a whole session on them because they're contributing to this very difficult, I mean, as a neighbor, I'm trying to find out the owners of these properties, and the Register of Deeds is a big part of that problem. And the assessor of the city of Detroit. So that, and Sam, I got a question for you. Maybe this is politically incorrect since we're at U of M, but you mentioned when Poverty Solutions was started, it was really, the mayor wanted the university to help him research issues, and now that's not the case. But I would argue that if the mayor wanted the university to investigate, do a study on the inefficiencies of BC, you guys could find a lot of solutions to the ineffectiveness of BC, which is kind of a big part of this issue. You mentioned their inconsistency, but I would say it's more incompetence than inefficiency. So
You said it, not me.
yeah. Should I turn to the camera?
You don't need to, Eric. You were on this.
Yeah, I guess I was up. My picture was up. I want Sydney to sell me that so it doesn't appear anywhere anymore. She made us look, we were smiling too much. She made us. That house, by the way, is owned by the biggest speculator in my neighborhood. a guy by the name of Blake Micus, who owns 15 empty, more than 15, but the city is suing him for 15 houses that look like that could really be a benefit to our community, and he's been sitting on them for 6, 7, 8 years. Anyway.
So I'll in quick kind of answer to Eric as far as it goes. It's definitely true that Poverty Solutions, you know, our partnership with the city of Detroit really was, like I said before, came out of the idea that they had a limited capacity to look at their own social policy data, and they have, the good news is they have much more capacity now to do that. I mean, Eric suggests that there are some political reasons why they wanted to keep it more in-house, but it's also ultimately probably a good thing that the city has more data collection and analytics abilities than they used to. I would say that I spend a significant amount of my time in like non-main projects in various groups around these different issues, in which it's a combination of nonprofits, universities, and city people trying to figure out how to make the data ecosystems work again. Because for multiple decades, the city of Detroit wasn't doing a lot around the data, so this whole ecosystem of nonprofits and other types of agencies kind of created its ecosystem around the gaps the city had, and now the city's trying to reemerge as like a partner in that. And that comes with a lot of complexities, right? And so things like property practice, I think, is actually a great example of that. It's like a less than perfect solution to a lot of the stuff that actually the city should be doing and making publicly available. As far as larger evaluation partnerships with the city goes, I mean, we are working with the city as far as the shot stoppers on the community violence intervention, but they've, but we're a small, Poverty Solutions is a very small outfit within the larger university, much less compared to the city, so, yeah. Always open to projects, though. I saw you back there, yes.
You know what? For those who may not understand the crypto influence, could you explain that a little bit?
Good luck.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm one of them. Okay, so cryptocurrency is digital currency that is essentially fake. I don't know. It's mined, which means that people do these really complicated algorithms to create coins. That's the extent of my real understanding about how these currencies come to exist. And there's a bunch of them now, bunch of them. The two most common ones are Bitcoin and Ethereum. A single Bitcoin is worth about $80,000. So, ironically, cryptocurrencies are a speculated asset themselves. And it does not have a ton of real-world uses yet. Now, cryptocurrency folks are trying to, because I think they recognize that they own a speculative asset, they're trying to create avenues to use that money in the real world. And a huge, potential source for that is real estate. And you talk to people who are really into cryptocurrency and real estate and the intersection, and they say, like, this is going to completely transform real estate. It will open up, make everything transparent. It will eliminate the need for title insurance because you'll have the entire deed record on the blockchain. The blockchain's another very complicated thing that I don't fully understand, but it's basically a digital record of every transaction. So like if you look, you can see tokens for this company, Realty. And a token is basically just like a share in a house. So a house will have like 1,500 tokens, all worth about $50 when they're offered originally. They're like, these investors are essentially shareholders in a house, except they happen to buy their shares with cryptocurrency. I hope I'm making sense.
Well, I'm just looking at the heading, and I'm looking at what you're saying here on your presentation,
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand the correlation, because for me, I don't understand crypto,
Yeah.
okay? So I'm trying to get as much understanding as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I guess to boil it down in the simplest way possible, people are using digital currencies that they just kind of created out of thin air, but are now worth a ton of money,
But
at
they're
least
still
on exchanges.
They're still valued in terms of dollars.
Yeah, no,
I mean, at the
an
end of
exchange
the
is.
day, it still comes back to state-backed, currencies.
It
seems
could.
like.
Yeah.
Well, their
There's.
value is based on supply and demand, and then they sell them, people buy them with real money, and then they buy and sell them based on, the supply and demand, but they're bought with real US dollars. So that's the way that the real money comes.
Or
Yeah,
overseas,
sure.
they're bought with foreign currency.
Well, yeah,
Sure.
but I mean like
Sure.
currency, like government-backed currency.
Yes, thank you. That is definitely true. And now these people own, in theory, according to Realty, a piece of a home in Detroit, and each home has a few hundred token holders on average. That's the number of token holders. And now, see, they said they've sold tokens to Detroit homes in more than 150 countries. Again, not the United States. It's a really wild scheme. It's when you say everything out loud, it's truly hard to believe. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm trying to figure out how that could actually be an investment vehicle. Like you said, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of property that's boarded up, that is just sitting there, that's not getting much use out of it. How do you actually make money off that? Or is most of it going into rental properties where at least you're getting,
Are you talking about speculation generally,
or
or?
like crypto, yeah.
These guys.
So specifically for Realty, again, in theory, all of these properties are going to be rented out. In theory, it's not actually the case. And they're going to be giving dividends to the shareholders, the token holders, based on the rental income the property is generating. We actually found at least 100 properties are vacant. They're still issuing dividends in most of those properties, which is very, very fishy. We're not entirely sure how that's happening. They said they got some kind of insurance policy from investors in the Middle East, is what they told me. I don't know what that means. It's a very, they were very vague and evasive about it. At the same time, they continue to tokenize more and more properties. So are they tokenizing properties to fund, are they tokenizing more properties to fund, yeah, exactly, right. That's definitely a possibility. I don't know if you want to talk more about how speculation makes money more generally.
Well, so I was gonna say, one way to think about it too is that cryptocurrency is generally unregulated, right? So it is if you're an investor, you're looking at different ways you can invest, right? Everybody who's gone through the financial education thing can think of okay, well, you could just put it in your mattress, most safe, doesn't make any extra money, right? You can put it in some kind of the market in one way or another, right? And follow the stocks up and down or the bonds up and down. Real estate is another thing. That's a lot of what happens with speculation is, hey, I think I'm going to make ultimately more money on this putting it in real estate than I'm going to make it putting it in a mutual fund, right? Or something along those lines. Part of it is speculation. I got time to do that. I got 10, I got 20 years to do that. Cryptocurrency is a great combination of those, which is cryptocurrency, you buy a cryptocurrency, it does not do anything. So it's sitting in a bank somewhere, and our current bank regulations, although this may change in the near future, don't allow a lot of regular banks to hold cryptocurrency. So when you're holding cryptocurrency, you're not usually getting a return on your investment in the way that if you had a mutual fund, there's you get a return directly. So there's a bunch of this cryptocurrency that's sitting out there, not doing anything. They're trying to figure out how to make money off of that. So you put your cryptocurrency into another type of market, that's the real estate market, right? And with the real estate market, it's also relatively unregulated. So cryptocurrency makes sense to go into that, and it sits there. So it is going to be for like the dividends that are made from rent, but it could also be their way of speculating long term with the cryptocurrency. Like in a way, they already have the cryptocurrency. They might as well have it do something else, which is hold property. That's kind of my theory on it as well. Yeah, but that may have made it more complicated than it otherwise was.
It seems to me like the underlying model of speculative markets in general is really kind of like the pyramid scheme. The idea is you're just holding space for a period of time until somebody else comes in with the money that will, in other words, you're not doing anything. That's the idea of capitalism functioning, is that money of markets, and you have money, and it's, and their labor, and things are produced and stuff like that. So money does work, right? It's a reflection of work being done. But there's also cases, this is where Josh Shaker's work, I think, was so important, because he sort of, again, lifted up the curtain to show that like what was happening in Detroit wasn't like an accident or breakdown of the market. Actually, it was functioning. It was a functioning market. It was just a functioning market that was extremely destructive to actual communities. It's like, he called it the production of decline, right? We actually had a system that was incentivizing abandonment and decline for a certain set of people. And that exists presumably in any city, and usually I imagine, I'll defer to like Eric's expertise here, that it's segmented. You have poor neighborhoods, or you have speculators who are very active, or in certain areas of poor neighborhoods. And so decline is profitable for some people, and then in that same city you have other areas where it's this other gentrification market, or it's a profit-making market. But I think the thing in Detroit was that this had become the dominant form, and that then shaped everything for everything. Everything else in the city was affected by that. I mean, even going down to like what you mentioned, a lot of what Josh focused on was just the brutality of this displacement of people from their homes, and we don't even know all the downstream consequences of that. But so I guess the question is, how do you get back to like a functioning real estate market, which will still have corruption and speculation in it, but where it's not the dominant form, and mostly these markets are functioning to produce, value, right? For as you mentioned, for the city, for the residents, and for people engaged in business.
Before you answer his question, can
That
I
wasn't really
ask? REIT, what is that? Real Estate Investment Income Trust or something?
Yeah.
Is that the same? Is this the same concept as this crypto?
Good question. So yes, real estate investment trusts are basically funds that people can put their money into, and these funds will invest in real estate. It's what would be a good analogy? It's like a mutual fund or something you might do on the stock market, but like strictly for real estate, the barrier to entry for REITs is high. I think like most require a minimum investment of thousands of dollars. You might even need to be registered in a certain way to invest in REITs. Did I put REITs on there or no? Okay. You just know a thing or two. Probably know more than me. I don't know a ton about REITs, but like one of the big appeals for buying real estate tokens is that the barrier to entry is extremely low. You need a crypto wallet and then $50. And then you can essentially participate in a REIT of a certain kind. They're obviously not regulated in the same way, but that is a big appeal for these tokens.
Well, if it's unregulated, how can a city, if they want to, get not control, but some check and balances? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that is a great question. This is, the biggest question that I still have is what authority does the city have to regulate this? And I don't think it's very much. the city can regulate building conditions. So they could sue Realty like they have other speculators to bring their portfolio up to code. They could sue maybe in the same way that they did for Michael Kelly and the Hagermans for predatory land contracts. Maybe there's some arrangement there with renters that is potentially violating the law. I really do think this is a matter for the Michigan Attorney General's office. But these are still issues that I'm trying to figure out. I've been doing a lot of background research and interviews with folks since this article came out to try and get a better understanding myself, but there are so few people that are active in this kind of law, and because it's such a novel kind of real estate, I think there's tons of unanswered questions. So Realty is the world's largest cryptocurrency marketplace, the world's largest. They own 1,000 properties in Detroit. REITs own magnitudes more properties across the country. So like this is still relatively small. It just so happens to be happening, relatively speaking, on a big scale here in Detroit. Yeah.
One thing I will add though is that there may not need to be any change in the law or regulations whatsoever, right? So let's take exactly what we have on the books right now. We have a rental registry that says you cannot legally rent out to somebody unless you register your property and then have it certified as being hospitable for occupancy, right? And so the idea behind these things, and every city right now is thinking about what they're trying to do with the rental registry. That is where we're at in the housing picture. But if 100% of the properties were on a registry, right, then the city could enforce and say, you can own this property, but you can't rent it to somebody, right? So that's kind of where, because like Aaron says, property law in the U.S. is very strong, right? So it's going to be very difficult to say, you guys can't buy this property or that property. But where the city may have more enforcement ability is you can't rent in that property, right? You cannot make money off of that property by renting it to people. And so that enforcement already exists. And along the lines of kind of the nuisance stuff too, right? Ideally, if you had a city that could do it, they would enforce nuisance in a way that would force people to fix up their property, or like Aaron said, lose it, because they would lose it to a nuisance lawsuit in that way too. So some of it is very complicated, but some of it just comes down to a lack of resources or priorities within the city on how to work on these things too.
I'll just add that, hi Heidi, Ryan, Chicago Fed. On the solution side, one of the possible ways to prevent more speculation is to increase local and residential ownership, right? So through home ownership or through community land trust or through, there's that. So one of the solutions I didn't see on there was actually, increasing home ownership so that residents actually own their property or other sort of local ownership. And obviously that touches into all the other issues that flow into land bank, real estate development costs, and whatever. There's conferences all day so you could talk about that stuff. But I just wanted to add that there is it's a really important solution. And the city has this down payment assistance program, and making home is one of those examples. And then also just wanted to say also that homeownership has to be sustainable, particularly around post-purchase support and protections. Being in Detroit knows very well what happens when there's predatory lending and illegal tax, property assessments and stuff. So there's lots of caveats, but just wanted to mention that homeownership and local residential ownership is a really important piece of the solutions.
Have you seen much in the way of real estate tokenization nationwide? Is that something the Fed has looked at?
I don't know personally. I haven't looked at it. I haven't heard anything personally, but I think that could be something that I could certainly look into. I mean, you can follow up with it. Just in terms of what other banks, what other reserve banks are seeing. I mean, we're tracking sort of crypto in lots of different ways and the real estate piece. So yeah, we could talk about that more.
I was just going to say, you can continue to discuss. I'm just going to say it's 11:40, and our speakers have been up here for a while, but we like to have a discussion. There are a lot of people here. feel free to have an open discussion and eat the fruit and the muffins. You don't have to buy anything today, so we're buying nothing today, except you're all gonna go and buy crypto real estate. That's gonna be next time for you.
$3,000 on the flyer.
And I know John had a question, and then I'm gonna have to slip out because I have to get ready for another thing. But yeah, you guys can feel free to carry on and have a great conversation.
Yeah, just, so you're telling me with this, is just bringing back like the idea of mortgages that have been put into, like, sliced up and sold to investors, and like the whole idea of, after the mortgage crisis, trying to figure out who owned properties, and that kind of leads to the idea of like who actually, if it's recorded or what, is like the actual property owner of record in these cases. Yeah.
Well, yeah, as I said before, Realty has created a new LLC for almost every single one of their properties. The member that's always listed on their LLCs is one of the co-founders of Realty. And I guarantee you, because it would be practically impossible, that they're not updating their membership based on who holds tokens. So if you look at who is the owner according to Michigan real estate law, it's clearly the co-founders of Realty. They, at least in my non-legal expert opinion, but they are always trying to say, no, it's the token holders. It's the token holders who are the owner. But I don't think that would actually really be recognized.
On the opposite side, I don't practice law right now or anymore, but if there would be some interesting legal cases there, right? So if I had a case that involved one of these properties, I would sue I would try to get every single person who held a token, because that is traditionally how real estate actually works too, is if you are a part owner in a property, you have full legal culpability for what happens on that property. It doesn't matter if you own just $50 worth of it. So like that's a case that would be really interesting, of course.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to do the formal sign out. Again, you're welcome to stay and talk. So I'm going to thank our guests.